What's up, everybody? This is the Metal Gladiator here. I'm joined here with Vilkamps,
What's up?
and today we are doing my second tier list video, so I guess you could call it episode 2. But, again, I'm not much of a... I started to try to do, like, a podcast thing. I'm not really a podcast person, so I'm doing tier list, which I really like this format, so there's definitely going to be a lot more of this to come with other special guests as well. This tier list is, as you can tell, Cannibal Corpse, which they've got 15 albums now. First album came out in 1990. Newest one came out 2021.
And we just saw them a couple months ago.
We did. We saw them in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was awesome. I'm going to give a quick explanation of how we're doing it. We're going to go through the discography, so starting at Eating Back to Life all the way through. Anything that we put in the tier list, like this, it would basically mean the album closest to the left, or farther left, closest to the letter, is the one we like most from that tier list. And the one farthest right, away from the letter, is the one we like least. So in this case, in this little example, I like Evisceration Plague in C tier the most, and my least favorite in C tier is Gore Obsessed. That is not reflective of my actual tier list. That's just an example. I'm gonna go first. We'll be starting with the first one, Eaten Back to Life. So Eaten Back to Life, I'm putting in the lowest tier, tier D. Also, there's no F tier once again because they haven't really released a bad album. But Eaten Back to Life is tier D. We're starting pretty low, which I mean is kind of to be expected with a lot of bands. Rarely does the debut album is like a masterpiece or anything like that, you know. And this one still has like a lot of thrash elements to it because death metal was still evolving in the early 90s like this, so you don't expect much from this album. It is what it is, and I enjoy it, but in terms of their discography, it is one of my least favorites from this band. Also, this second tab is Williams. I should have mentioned that earlier.
I'm gonna place it a little bit higher than yours. Maybe because I'm super into thrash. I don't know, but I'm gonna put it in C.
Okay.
I agree with all your points. It's not great. It's their first album. There's a lot to be desired there. With some of the early albums, their biggest like catching point is the artwork. The artwork is sick.
Yeah, they definitely stirred up a lot of controversy with the first 3.
But yeah, the cover's dope. I love the cover, but the album's not quite as good as the cover.
Yeah, the cover is definitely good. We definitely need to mention the artworks because it is an essential part of Cannibal Corpse. I can understand that viewpoint. I'm definitely really into thrash too, but considering that this is a death metal band, I felt that it was more appropriate to put in D. But I was also, I think originally I had it in C, but then I moved it down. We basically have the same kind of opinion or thought process with this album.
Yeah, and I just meant like even with like death metal, black metal, like the early stuff that's really thrashy still is like some of my favorites sometimes from those genres. Like I love Death's first album. I love early Venom stuff. Like even though those would like become completely different genres from thrash, they still have a lot of thrash there.
Oh yeah, for sure. The title to the album is weird if you think about it. If you really stop and think about the wording of it, Eaten Back to Life.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's definitely odd.
It doesn't make any sense. Basically,
I think
they
okay,
basically
I think I got it figured out. Okay, it's a dead guy, right? So it's a zombie.
Yeah.
So he's eating himself.
Right.
Give himself nutrition, become alive again.
That still doesn't make any sense. I was thinking you play a zombie movie, the scenes where people are getting eaten in reverse, eaten back to life. That's something. The next album is Butchered at Birth. I am going to put this album in B tier, so kind of like that middle ground. I really, really like this album. This is when they kind of started getting a little bit more guttural with the vocals. Chris Barnes still had that kind of like thrashy voice. He was trying to be a little bit more high and stuff. After kind of realizing that he couldn't really sing like that, he was like, I kind of suck at this. So he starts kind of blending his voice with the instruments in the band, who were getting heavier as well at this point. This was kind of when death metal starts to, like, especially the Cannibal Corpse kind of gets a little bit more identity. Like, hey, this is death metal right here. Honestly, in my opinion, it's still not quite there. It's definitely death metal. The lyrics are all written, I think most of the lyrics were written by Chris Barnes in Eaten Back to Life, but other members had some input. All the lyrics were done by Chris Barnes in this album and the next two albums as well. So he did all the lyrics. A lot of the other guys were just focusing on music, and he just let it rip with the lyrics, and they are intense. If you really like actually read some of these lyrics in this album and the next one, it's crazy. It's insane. It's like, no wonder they were on freaking FBI Most Wanted. No, I'm just kidding. They weren't on that, to my knowledge, anyway. But it's a very good album, and I think B tier is appropriate for it. And the artwork is just gruesome. This was the first artwork that got them
so good.
That got them in a lot of trouble in retail. So
I also am gonna put it in B.
Also in B. Okay, nice.
Big step up from the first album.
B, big step up.
Yeah, B, big step up from C. It's actually just one step up, but you know what I mean. It's one big step up. Much better than the first one. Like you said, still not perfect. They had an upward track here.
Yeah, as bands should.
Going places, yes.
The band goes downhill. That's a bad sign.
The artwork is dope. Like, it's awesome.
It really is. I actually have the like symbol from this album, the Butcher Baby, on my guitar, Warlock guitar, the sticker. So
yeah,
that's pretty cool. Tomb of the Mood. This album is S tier, without a doubt. S tier. This is death metal at its finest. They upped everything. This is the lowest Chris Barnes ever gets. Arguably one of the lowest guttural vocal performances in the genre. That's kind of hard to say now because it gets kind of crazy, but who knows? I've never done much research on that, but it's low. And the artwork is intense, very intense. So is the lyrics. I was reading a little bit of the Bible Butchery book that I've got, and I think it was the bassist was talking about some of the lyrics from this album, and he was kind of like, yeah, if we were paying more attention to what Chris was writing and stuff, we probably would have wanted him to restrain some of the things, because yeah, and they basically, which this is true because they've never played the song live to my knowledge, maybe when Chris was in the band, but not since he's left and stuff. But they've never played the song Necropedophile. They basically said that they wouldn't play that one. So, I mean, even some of the members are kind of like, well, I mean, this is kind of pushing it a little too far.
Oh.
If you put the lyrics to some of these songs, any song from this album, gave it to, like, a therapist or something and said, this is what somebody wrote down, not even explaining that they're Cannibal Corpse songs, they would probably call the authorities. Not probably, they will call the authorities. It was some intense stuff. And of course, the song titles, Hammer Smash Face, Icon Blood, Addicted to Vaginal Skin, Necropedophile, Cryptid Stench, Entrails Ripped from a Virgin's Cunt. The song titles themselves kind of, raise some eyebrows. What is your placement?
I'm actually going to need you to add a tier. I need you to put F on here.
Yeah, you're real funny. You're real funny, man. You're funny.
This is S tier. This is
S tier. Okay. Okay.
For the what's his name, Chris Barnes, the
Yeah.
original singer. This is his peak.
Definitely.
Peaks here.
Definitely.
Peaks
This is that's his best, both in Cannibal Corpse and in 6 Feet Under.
I haven't really heard much 6 Feet Under, but
we don't talk about 6 Feet Under.
From what you were telling me about the vocal style,
yeah,
he peaks here. He peaks here.
6 Feet Under, even the early 6 Feet Under stuff is more like the bleeding kind of vocal style. His stuff.
Which I will have a continuation of what I just said on the next album.
Yes, the next album we'll be talking a lot about vocals. But anyway, this album was very, very good. This was the last album with one of the founding members, Bob Rousset, which was unfortunate, but they were getting faster and more technical as they keep progressing and stuff, and he just really couldn't keep up. And he basically just that was it. Like, that dude has only been in these 3 albums, and that's it. Like, he's just basically disappeared. He has some good input. He wrote a lot of material for these 3 albums. To a certain extent, he kind of had a part of the death metal genre growing. Hats off to him. But yeah, this was a really good album. This album kind of started going mainstream too. They were in a Jim Carrey movie, Ace Ventura, and they played Hammer Smash Face in the movie, which was pretty cool. Something else I want to mention, obviously the bass solo in Hammer Smash Face is awesome, but I can't remember which song it's in, but there's another bass solo that's really good as well. The musicianship is just all there. Alright, so the next one, when I find it, we have The Bleeding. So this is when things start getting interesting. We have some things to say about this album. Even after I've kind of basically filled out this whole tier list and basically said, this is my tier list, I'm even second guessing myself. For a long while, this was an S tier album for me, but I'm going to have to put it in A tier. Here's why. Musically, this is fantastic. I think the last album and this album is when Cannibal Corpse really found their style. Both of those albums show very much. The Bleeding has some of the catchiest riffs in their discography, in their catalog, and it's just so good. Probably my favorite song is the title track. Those riffs from the riffs from those songs, that song is just so great. Great album on a music standpoint. However, where it kind of lacks is the vocals. Chris Barnes it wasn't as deep. He went a bit higher, and this is when he kind of started doing his infamous which gets progressively worse and worse and worse. And worse, and worse, and worse, and worse, and worse. Anyway, after listening to this more recently, when we were listening to it together, this album is more fitting for Corpse Grinder style, without a doubt. When I hear it live, it sounds better. This is a Corpse Grinder era record with Chris Barnes. That's the best way to say it. That's the thing that was like dropping it down from S tier. I really like the artwork too, although it's not as bloody and brutal. Unfortunately, Chris Barnes just couldn't keep up.
So I'm going to differ a little bit from you. I'm still not 100% sure, honestly. I'm going to go with B. Yeah, we'll put it in front of Butchered.
Okay.
No, we're going to put it behind, because I was debating between B and C tier. Yes, I know. And here's the thing, I agree with everything you said. If Corpse Grinder was on this album, it's an S tier album. And the music is great. Obviously, hearing the songs from Corpse Grinder, they're great. The way this album here is recorded, the whole time listening to it, I was just like, this dude is struggling. He can't sing this anymore. No wonder they moved on and found somebody else. The whole time I was listening to the album, that's what I was thinking.
And that was a forced listen too. I gotta admit, I didn't really pick up on that on my first listen.
You telling me that this was his last album ahead of time helped me realize, but like as I was listening, if I didn't know that, I definitely because we were listening to them in order, going from the last one to this one, I would have been like, dude.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like,
is this the same guy? Because
I was the same way. I was like, this isn't as low. He's doing these high screeching that he never really did before, and it's just like, just feels so weird.
And it didn't feel like the high-pitched screeches a decision to fit the music. It seemed like he was doing that because he couldn't do the deep anymore. Couldn't keep up with the deep, so he switched to something else, is what it seemed like. Obviously, if it was a choice for this musically, this is what we think fits this part or this theme or song that we're going for, that would have turned out to be better decisions. But I don't think that just didn't seem to fit. It just felt like he couldn't do it.
This really feels like a band versus vocalist album. They're not on the same page, and it's just clashing. There's some moments that it's just like he just finished singing this, and they're already into the next riff.
If they kept the exact music tracks that are already recorded, and then just got Corpse Grinder, record all the lyrics, and re-release an album with Corpse Grinder's vocals on it, be S tier. But the vocals are so distracting, because the whole time I was like, this dude is struggling.
You know what? I'm going to. But I'm going to say it's better than Butchered. A lot of stuff happens between this album and the next one. Originally, the next album was titled Created to Kill, which was a pretty thrash-sounding title. It just makes me think of Pleasure to Kill from Creator. So I'm glad they changed the title, first off. Vile is much more fitting for them. So basically what happened is they were recording with Barnes. During the practice room, they didn't really hear much, but when they actually get into the studio, they start noticing a lot. He's still struggling, of course. I think he goes on tour with 6 Feet Under, like, during the time that they were in the studio, which that's kind of like
probably just kind of move on anyway.
Yeah, that's not a good move. That just seems like a joke kind of move. Anyway, so they got Corpse Grinder. The band that Corpse Grinder used to first band was a band called Corpse Grinder. That's where he got his nickname. So, and then he goes to a band called Monstrosity, which is a pretty cool band. I even think he recorded the last album with Monstrosity during the recording of Vile as well. Like, he was going back and forth in the studio. They got Corpse Grinder, and it's all history from there. He's the main vocalist this entire time. Vile is basically everything that The Bleeding should have been. I like it a lot more than The Bleeding, and I am putting it in A tier. And I want to make something clear. Vile was still ahead of The Bleeding in my original tier list. Vile is a much better album than The Bleeding, in my opinion. And the vocals, of course, have a big part to do with that, because The Bleeding, the vocals are very distracting. Corpse Grinder is amazing. I'm going to say it right now, he is the best death metal vocalist of all time. No mic cupping. He is so good at pronouncing words at a super fast speed. It's ridiculous. And musically, this album is very good. They definitely start going into the more technical, faster stuff. Considering how much Chris was struggling with The Bleeding, like, there's no way he could have done this album at all. If we would have heard that, like, that would have just been terrible. Oh yeah, we would have FTR. he would ruin this album, which sucks because the music is beautiful. But yeah, this album is great. I love it. It's very close to being an S tier for me too. I love it that much. It's just a great album. Great album indeed. Where would you place Vile?
Same place as you.
A
tier.
Yeah. Awesome. It's a great album.
Just the shift to Corpse Grinder is just
one of the best decisions they've made their entire career. Obviously, because he's still the vocalist.
And he's so iconic.
We're a funny guy, too. His stage presence was great.
Yes.
He was like, when we saw him, he was, of course, he's always going to be very dark and brutal when he's, like, announcing song titles and stuff. He's going to yell at you and everything, but he's going to crack some jokes. It's hilarious. I love watching interviews and, like, stuff with him. He's great. What is your favorite track off of Vile?
So, I guess full disclosure here, I listened through the Cannibal Corpse discography once, and I've heard some albums more than once. So I'm not, like, as super familiar with them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and I did go to the concert. I can't just pick out, this one. Oh, like, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. They did play.
Sometimes I don't remember. Like, and there's a couple of later albums that I know I have favorites from. I can't really remember from this one.
My favorite is Orgasm Through Torso. The riffs in that one remind me a lot of Immolation's harmonics and stuff, and I love Immolation, but it's just so good. It's such a great song. But yeah, Vile, great album. Alright, we are back to my tier list. And the next one is Gallery of Suicide, which this is the first album that has Pat O'Brien on it. Rob Barrett leaves. He was on The Bleeding and Vile. This album is kind of hit or miss with me. I'm putting it in C tier. I still like it. There's some songs that I really, really like Dismembered and Molested, Sentenced to Born. I really like the instrumental. Instrumentals are not something they do often. I think they only have like 3 instrumentals in their entire discography. One in Vile, which I think is Badlands or Bloodlands, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong. I might be wrong about that. But there's one in Vile. From Skin to Liquid is the one in Gallery of Suicide, and then there's one later. I think there's like 14 tracks on this album. That's a little bit much for a Cannibal Corpse album, in my opinion. So it kind of drags for me, but I still like the album for what it is. Kind of hit or miss. I don't listen to it too often, as much as other ones, but I feel like C tier is a proper place for it. The artwork for this is pretty cool as well. But yeah, so where is your placement for Gallery of Suicide?
Okay. I have it in B tier, behind the bleeding.
Behind the bleeding. Okay.
I think a lot of it. I think there's some good stuff here. But overall, I do think it drags, like you said. Overall, I think it's just kind of mediocre. Not a ton of memorable. It didn't stick out in a bad way the way the bleeding did for me because of the vocals, but like it also didn't stand out in a good way either. It was just kind of.
I don't go out of my way to listen to it often, but I do from time to time. Because I'm just going to go ahead and say it. This is my favorite Cannibal Corpse album. It is S tier. It beats Tomb of the Mutilated, in my opinion. Very close, though. Those two albums are like right at each other in terms of quality. I think the one thing that really gives it an edge that I always go back to and just always am so mind blown is the production, which we haven't really touched on with most of these albums. But the production of this album was produced by Colin Richardson, and that man is a legend. I'm not gonna claim that I know a lot about production, far from it. This album is just blows my mind every single time I listen to it, no matter how many times I listen to it. And the artwork, amazing. The flow of the songs in this album is just great as well. It's just so good. Such a great album. I fanboyed enough over it, so let's get your thoughts. Where would you place Bloodthirst?
Need that F tier again.
That's it. You're never gonna be in another video again.
No, this is S tier. I have it behind
Okay.
the Mutilated. Maybe that'll change with more listens, but this one I have only listened to once. Once is enough to put it in S tier for me.
But
artwork is dope.
Every single song on this album is great. Pounded Into Dust is like one of the best ways to start a Cannibal Corpse album. The majority of the time, they're always starting hard. It's just right in your face. A couple albums, like the first two, I think like A Skeletal Domain, maybe one other one, I can't remember, I don't think so, but like a couple of them actually have like kind of fade in intros, they kind of build. Most of their albums, it's gonna start right away, and obviously my favorite opening track to any of their albums is Pounded Into Dust, and then of course they follow up with Dead Human Collection. I just love this album. Yeah. I could go on and on about it and not really say anything except for the same stuff all over again. So we are moving on. Next up, we have Gore Obsessed. And sadly, they start going downhill a little bit. It's weird because they have this era of kind of like mediocre, but in between them, they have their best album. I'm actually going to put Gore Obsessed in D tier, Eating Back to Life. I like Eating Back to Life a little bit more. I don't hate this album, but it just doesn't really do much for me. It's more mediocre stuff, kind of like Gallery of Suicide, but Gallery of Suicide is better. After coming off of Bloodthirst, I just can't really listen to this album much. It's got some cool songs and stuff. Like, I think the first, 2 or 3 songs are just really good. It does drag a lot. I think the song When Death Becomes Life, I really like that one. Probably my favorite one, but it's near the end of the album, so it's really weird. They got a few really good songs that I like, but yeah, I'm not crazy about Gore Obsessed. So far, as you can see, it's my least favorite. The artwork's pretty good though. I do like it. The artworks are always really strong, I think. Back to William's tier list.
This one's going in D tier.
Your first D tier.
D tier, and I'll tell you why. We listened to this whole album. Some of them even because we were listening to them in car rides. Some of them we listened to even more than once, not a full second time, but sometimes overlap. And I don't remember anything from this.
It's not very memorable.
So yeah, that kind of tells you yeah.
Yeah.
I can't recall anything
that kind of
about it sticking out.
Yeah, that kind of complements what I said, because the last album is S tier, and then you go into this, and it's We are going into the Wretched Spawn. This is a step up from Gore Obsessed, for sure. I like this album a lot more than Gore Obsessed. I'm going to place it at the end of B tier for now. This might change. The artwork of this is pretty cool too. And I really like the story of this artwork because they basically said, okay, this is getting ridiculous. We're sick of doing censored covers because nobody buys them. So screw you guys. We're not making. They basically just like, okay, if you don't want to stock him, then don't, because we're not making a censored cover. I do like this album. Frantic Disembowelment is probably my favorite song, although I feel like it should have just been an instrumental, because on the making of DVD they basically have the instrumental and it's just so much better. I don't really like listening to it with the lyrics. Just seems like a better instrumental. But yeah, that's a very good song. Some pretty good songs, I think. Decency Defied, Severed Head Stoning, Blunt Force Castration, They Deserve to Die. You know, it's a pretty solid album, I think. It's up there. It's kind of like that middle ground, 50-50. I don't go out of my way to listen to it often. When I do listen to it, I very much enjoy it. Moving on to William.
Have it in B tier as well. Have it ahead of Gallery of Suicide.
Okay. So ahead of Gallery of Suicide, but behind The Bleeding.
So
The
it's a
same
step
placement.
up from the last one, but like remember more of these ones. Like this was more memorable.
This is the last album with Jack Owen, which was one of the founding members, the founding guitarist. Some like country and stuff, like with acoustic. He kind of has a little bit of like a non-metal influence into his songs, which I kind of like. Not saying that it's like it sounds like death metal mixed country. It's not that at all. You can have non-metal influence in metal music and still make it metal. It's just an influence. It doesn't mean that you're mixing two genres. Like he likes a lot of like stuff like Johnny Cash and stuff, and he does write a lot more of the more groovy songs, kind of like the slow, just kind of like catchy groovy songs. I think he still is playing. I think he joined 6 Feet Under, actually.
Oh, really?
Didn't help them whatsoever. Rob Barrett joins the band again, and then we get the album Kill, which surprised some fans because of the artwork. It's literally just the word kill. I thought that was a good choice. We don't need to have this overly graphic artwork to represent the music, you know, that kind of thing. Like, we can still be a good band without this graphic artwork. And obviously they can be, and of course this album proves it. But I really like this album. I am placing it in A tier, behind Vile. Production of this album is very good as well. Eric Rutan, who's now the guitarist of the band as well, he produced this album. The musicianship, very good. And this is an album that doesn't drag, which is kind of shocking because the last few albums that had about 13 or 14 songs, like this one does, dragged. This one doesn't. And I think like the last song is an instrumental. They really nailed this album. Everything about it is really good. I don't think I can really pick a favorite off of this album. It flows very well too. Like each song flows into the next, like just like that, you know.
I actually have it in the same spot that you do.
A tier.
Nice.
Nice.
Tier behind Vile. I feel like I've heard this one a bit more too. It's really good.
Might be a controversial opinion, but I do like the artwork. I think it fits it very well. Right now, both of our A tier is the exact same. Next album, we have Evisceration Plague. This album is pretty solid. It's not my favorite. I kind of have the same opinion about this one as I do with like Gallery of Suicide. There are some really cool parts that I like. The first few songs are really good. I do like the title track of Evisceration Plague. Probably my favorite song off of this is To Decompose. Really good, catchy song. George's vocal performance on that song is great. I think the big downfall with this album was there wasn't enough of a collaborative effort. The bassist basically writes 95% of this album. There's a few songs that other people wrote, but he basically wrote most of the album. And I kind of feel like that was the downfall for this one. But it's still pretty solid. I'm actually going to put it top of D tier, if I can. There we go. I still like it. It's not my favorite. It's still a very well produced album though, and I do like the artwork as well. Had that more dark, sinister look to it than just like graphic.
I currently have it tier at the back.
At the back. Okay. So you were filling up that B tier. Yeah.
That's where a lot of it sits for me. But yeah, there are those few tracks that you mentioned.
I gotta say, when we were listening to it in the car, I kind of started gaining a little bit more appreciation to it, just because of how much we were blasting it, in a way. Just that blasting setting is just very good for this kind of music. Okay, so next up is Torso. This album and the next album after this is part of the discography that I have always struggled with the most. Torso was the first Cannibal Corpse album I listened to. This album is my introduction to the band. I really liked it, so I started getting into a lot of their other stuff. And by the time A Skeletal Domain comes out, I'm a big fan. I've listened to their whole discography, and I have a lot of hype towards that album. So those two albums, Torso and Skeletal Domain, for me, have been at this constant battle of which one I like more. But for now, I'm going to put Torso at the top of A tier. I love this album. I got some bias towards it, but it was a great introduction to the band. The flow of the album is very good. It's got so much fast stuff and then like really groovy songs. I remember my first listen, I was kind of unsure for the first couple tracks, but as soon as Scourge of Iron came on, I was hooked like that. That is my favorite song. Surprising, it's not on Bloodthirst, but that's my favorite song for the sole fact that that was what made it click for me. Like, I was like, this is awesome. But this album's just really good. It's got a lot of catchy things to it. That's something I always love about Cannibal Corpse. They have a nice balance from this full-on death metal, fast, technical, brutal, and then just being like really, really good and just like catchy. They have a nice blend of it. A song that's been sticking out a lot to me recently, especially since we listened to it, is The Strangulation Chair. That song's really, really good, and that bass solo on that is just so great. It's amazing. And the artwork. Oh, the artwork's so good. Moving on to William.
Mine is also at the top of A tier.
So all A tiers are basically the same.
So far, yeah. Scourge of Iron, it's so good. Yeah, I feel like I've heard this one a little bit more too because of how much you've talked about it,
but definitely a step up from Evisceration. Remember how I was saying that I've been conflicted with Torso and Skeletal Domain? This is where you're going to find out which one's better than the other. A Skeletal Domain, I'm going to put at the end of S tier. For now, this most likely is going to change, but the hype I felt for this album when it came out, the production's very good. This is probably the heaviest bass sound that they had. Not saying that you can never hear the bass, but it's just very heavy in this one. Songwriting is great. It's got a nice blend between all the members, and it's just so good. And I love the artwork. Dark, sinister, not so much graphic and brutal. I love this artwork. One of my favorite artworks. This album is great. Probably my favorite track, if I can even pick a favorite. Holy crap. I don't think I can do it. Never mind.
Mine's a little different on this one.
Okay.
I wasn't really listening to them when this came out like you were, so I have it in A tier, behind Torture.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously I really like this album. Killer Become is my favorite from this one. That was probably the first Cannibal Corpse song that I remember hearing that really stuck with me.
And I can't get over that artwork, man. I need this album on vinyl. Red Before Black is disappointing. I'm putting it at the end of C tier. I'm not crazy about this album. I enjoy it. I have some songs that I really like. Code of the Slashers is really good. I really like the title track, Red Before Black. Remaimed is probably my favorite off of this album. It's like Kill is really good. Evisceration Plague isn't that great. Torso's really good. Skeletal Domain is better. And then Red Before Black's just kind of like, okay, we're going downhill again. It doesn't do much for me. It's still not bad. Yeah, I think C tier, at the end of C tier, is a good placement for. Where would you place it?
I've got it in the same place, actually. The only one that really stood out to me was Ushers.
We are going to the new one, Violence Unimagined. And this is a step up. I really, really like this album. And because of that, I am actually going to put it at the end of A tier. Still not as good as Kill, but I think it's right there with it. Listened to this album multiple times already. It kind of went under my radar for a while. I still like it a lot. This is the first album with Eric Rutan as guitarist as well. I think he only wrote like 2 songs or something. Those songs are pretty good. I can't tell you which ones those are, but probably my favorite song off of this album is Surround, Kill, Devour. The artwork's pretty cool. Let's see what William says.
You noticed I smiled a bit when you said where you put it, because I've got it at the same spot, the end of A.
End of A tier.
But yeah, this one was really good.
Yeah, I remember we listened to it on the way to the concert as well. So I would say they have a very solid discography. Williams tier list, my tier list. With that, we are going to close off the video. I enjoyed it. Hope you guys do as well. More of these will be coming as well. Comment below what your tier list is. That's going to be the end of the video. I'm going to have all my social links, my Twitch, second YouTube channel, all that stuff in the description. You got Verocamps over here. His stuff's going to be in the description as well. Check him out. See you in the next one.
Auf Wiedersehen.